Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Today we're going to learn a little bit about the idea of other dimensions besides the dimension that we're currently in. And in order to do that, we first need to learn just a tad about the dimension that we're in so we can use that information to launch ourselves into seeing what might be in other dimensions. And so I'm going to start with, as always, my model here for the dimension of time, which is where I suggest that we are in the dimension of time. And another way to say the dimension of time appears to be in the third dimension. So hopefully you can all identify with the idea that we are in a dimension where we experience height, width, and depth. And in terms of time, we experience past, present, future. In terms of self, memory, emotion, imagination, protons, neutrons, electrons. Any way that I look, everything here seems to be in threes, and so the third dimension. And what the model says, again, that we're in the dimension of time, and that time is like a mirror to us, to where we are only ever seeing or experiencing reflections of ourselves. And time is not like an ordinary mirror, but it's what I know of as a complex mirror, so it's like a folding mirror. So this model here is a folding mirror where I form, when I enter the dimension of time, I form an arrangement I know of as space and time, or what Einstein called the space-time continuum. And that when I'm in the space-time continuum, which I suggest that we all are if you're watching this video, I'm having a space-time gravity experience, because I have three parts to that experience as well. Now I'm going to show you this real quick, or I'm going to try to show it to you, because I'm going to reference this when we start talking about the dimensions. So bear with me here just a second, but I want to show you when we are in time and experiencing these three reflections of the self. If I can do that, I'm letting you look in the mirror to see what I'm seeing, and there we have one reflection of the self. You can see me standing behind there, and hopefully you can see the computer and the camera. And then what you can't see, but what I'm going to show you, there is another reflection of self right there, and then there's my thumb holding the mirror. So we're back to this reflection of self, if I bring that into focus, and then I have yet a third reflection of self right there, and my thumb again. And so basically we have that arrangement here where we always experience three reflections of the self inside of this place. Now if you want to learn a little bit more about all of this and my model for time, there's another video in my channel about it, and it's called Unified Field Theory, A Model for Time. And if you want to learn even more than that, you could actually go through the trouble to read my book, Heal Yourself in Time, and that is available on my website at thegameoftime.com. And if you want to go even further than that, you could actually play the healing game of cards I invented to help us learn about this and to heal ourselves from within this dimension, the game of time itself. Okay, and so we need this preliminary information if we're going to understand the rest of what I'm about to show you, because I'm going to reference this in the video. Again, because first dimension and actual definition is the dimension of time itself, a single definition of everything that is. Again, second dimension will become space and time when we unfold the time mirror to form that. Third dimension will become the space-time gravity experience. So again, you'll hear me reference that in the video. And so what we're trying to do when we're looking into other dimensions besides the dimension that we're in is we're trying to look into and see what's in what I know of as the dark piece of reality. And so we're trying to look and see things that we otherwise shouldn't be able to see or shouldn't be able to know. And in order to do that, it means that what we're doing is we're making an interpretation right there. Not just an interpretation, but it's actually an interpretation of an interpretation. And so what that means is what I'm about to show you, although it's compelling and it's interesting and it makes a lot of sense, it's not necessarily the way things are, it's only the way things look. And it's only the way they look to me when I look through this model for reality. Okay, so as confusing as all that sounds here, let's just get started. So without further ado, 12 dimensions of consciousness and beyond. So I want to start us here with this diagram. This is an overview of everything that we're going to talk about in a rather crude way. But there are 12 of these rings on this diagram, and so from where this talks, first dimension begins here in the innermost ring, and we're going to work our way out all the way to 12th dimension and see if we can't even just go a little bit further than that. And from where this talks, the way we go from dimension to dimension to dimension, from first outward, is we go an increasing order of magnitude. So one way to say this when we start in first dimension is we can start very, very small, the smallest something that might be able to be a definition of everything that is. Before we go on and start into this, I just want to say also that there is no one way to do this. There is no one definition for any of these dimensions. In fact, when you choose a definition for, let's say, first dimension, that definition tends to define other dimensions that are related to that train of thought from first out. And so as you'll see, we're going to start in first dimension here. And from this model and from what I just showed you earlier, one definition of everything that we can talk about here is actually time, because we're looking into time. We're looking into the time mirror, and everything we see is essentially time. But another way to define first dimension, if we're talking about something that could encompass everything that is, or what everything is made of, which would be a way to say it, a definition of first dimension could also be light, because in this reality it seems when we investigate what things are made of and we take that in the reverse order, from third to second to first, we find matter breaks down to subatomic particles, and that breaks down to light. So yet another way to say light would be to say photon. And so this would be a perfectly acceptable definition of first dimension, is that everything could be viewed from particle theory as being made of photons. And a slightly different theory would see this in a little bit of a different way and say that everything is made of something they call superstrings. Superstrings are theorized to be one-dimensional rings of energy that make up everything. And so here we are in first dimension looking for definitions of first dimension. Superstring would qualify. But the definition that I'm looking for, and the one we're going to be pursuing all the way to 12th, is consciousness itself. And so this is saying that everything that is in this place is consciousness, whether it's a rock, whether it's a tree, whether it's a bird, whether it's the sky. Take your pick, it's all consciousness. So moving on from first dimension, and remembering that we're going to be following this train of thought through, we're going to go on to second dimension. And I'm going to start again with our model, because as you remember from the folding mirror, when I unfold the mirror, I come to a representation that we know of as space-time, or the space-time continuum. And a way to interpret that in this diagram is something inside of something. So a big picture and a little picture. And from this definition, the little picture is the space picture. The big picture is the time picture, because again, time was encompassing of everything. And something else that has just happened in second dimension, we could call differentiation. Differentiation is just saying that there are now two somethings. There's something and there's something else. And one of the explanations this model claims that happens in second dimension, if we started with, let's just say, a photon, is that the photon copies itself in a mirror. So this, another way to say this is something and a copy of the something, that it happened in this mirror arrangement. Another crude example of this that we might all be able to identify with has to do with our own physical bodies once again, because by our perception we all started out as a single cell. And then the first thing that happened was that cell made a copy of itself and split into two cells. And at that point, there was really no way to tell the difference between the original cell and the copy. And both of those cells went on separate journeys. This one went to divide again and again and again, and so did this one. But yet they were also both on the same train ride. In fact, from my lifetime perspective, they're still on the same train ride, because somewhere in this thing are the repercussions of what happened here between first and second dimension. Another definition of this energy signature, if you've watched any of my other videos, is something I call analog. An analog is a representation of something that has two poles. And believe it or not, all of our troubles in this place have to do with this energy signature and this perception. And part of the reason for that it's because I can only suggest to you that this is also the energy signature of an illusion that I am trying to make sense of. And so something that happens in second dimension, when we explore this just a little bit further, you will see, is that interpretation becomes reality here. Again, because we're trying to interpret an illusion. Now, other ways to interpret second dimension: when we take photon to the next order of magnitude, we come to another perception of particles that we know of as subatomic. And what I have drawn here is a representation that we perceive of the simplest atom, the hydrogen atom, which is comprised in our perception of a single proton and a single electron. So we haven't even reached neutron here yet, but neutron is a perception of a particle from particle theory that we perceive in the subatomic world. Again, we have differentiation, protons and electrons, but we also could see from this diagram, we also have a something inside of a something, a reality bubble inside of a reality bubble. Nested awareness, one inside of the other. Here is yet another representation of a two-pole perception of our universe. In this diagram, I'm showing quasars and black holes as being large picture two-pole realities in the space-time continuum, where light, matter, energy, take your pick, three different ways to say the same thing, are gushing out of the quasars. And on their journey, they're playing a game or dancing a dance, they're interacting with each other, and ultimately disappearing into the black hole. And from where this talks, when they disappear into the black hole, they come right back out the quasar and do the journey all over again. And where we are in time is along the ride of this. As the photons come out of the quasar, they make copies of themselves, they interact with themselves, they play the game that they play, they become everything that we perceive as stuff of the universe, including our bodies, ride that ride, and disappear into the black hole again to do it all over again. So there are reasons why we have this two-pole perception. It's just that getting lost here, getting stuck here, again, is somewhat of the trouble of this place. I have a few of these to show you along the way of this story, as I'm going to show you next, and these are just some symbols that we know from different belief systems, different religions, that coincide with these different dimensions that I want to try to show and explain to you from this model. You may all recognize this yin-yang symbol, and again, this is a symbol of differentiation, and so a second dimension perception from where this talks. If you ask somebody what this means, the usual definition is something they call universal opposites, and so just once again, a way to say something different from something else. The ultimate definition we're still after here is consciousness, and so when we get to second dimension, we evolve from consciousness to awareness. And in this picture, awareness is being represented in exactly the same way as I've been showing. And when we talk about awareness, we talk about something where I have what's in the front of my mind, so what I'm aware of, and what goes to the potential of the back of my mind, which I become unaware. And in fact, I can even lose this piece that goes to the back of my mind. And so a very crude way to say this from this model would just be to say that I have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. So a conscious mind and something other than my conscious mind. Because ultimately, when we get to third dimension, my subconscious mind will evolve to include an unconscious part of my mind. So let's just move on to third dimension. And as usual, I'm going to start with the model that everything is based on, that says when I get to third dimension, what I have is a space-time gravity experience. And this is represented here, something inside of something inside of something. Another way to say space-time gravity, if you've been following any of my other videos, is the synonymous past, present, and future, which is something that we would more all be able to identify. When we take light from first dimension, evolve it to second dimension where it becomes protons, neutrons, and electrons, and then one more order of magnitude to third dimension, we come to what we ordinarily think of as matter, and also what we ordinarily think of as events. And so in third dimension, when we follow the model through this far, events become our reality. And so once again, ultimately the definition we're after here for all of our dimensions has to do with consciousness. And when I evolve consciousness from first dimension to second dimension of awareness and reach third dimension, I reach identity. I also reach what we just talked about, where my awareness has become conscious, subconscious, and unconscious. So 3 parts to a self. So this is just another way to say the same thing here. From symbols that you might recognize if you're familiar at all with my cards, a symbol for identity, 3 parts to a self, all connected, and I have yet then another of these interesting symbols to show you, and this one in particular seems to evoke strong response in some people, but I can only suggest to you that this is nothing other than a symbol representing your own identity, a symbol representing where we are in space-time gravity, staring into that mirror that seems to cut everything into 3 pieces. So we've got 3 sides to the triangle, 3 points to the triangle, and us looking into that reality. I can only suggest to you this symbol doesn't mean anything else but that, at least from where this model talks from. So when we evolve identity, one more dimension, so we've gone consciousness, we've gone awareness, now we've gone into identity, we come to a place where it's possible for us to actually have many identities. And so fourth dimension becomes a reality where there are actually many versions of reality here. And I'm going to try to explain what I'm showing on this diagram just a little bit. In a minute we're going to evolve this one more dimension to spirit dimension, and in spirit the symbol looks like this. And what this is saying, and this is only one version of an explanation of fourth dimension, that from spirit we choose to enter this place. We choose to arrange the pieces of our DNA. We, in fact, do exactly that and rearrange pieces in this place. In space-time gravity, within this universe, we may all be familiar with the concept that says nothing is ever created or destroyed. It only changes form. And so shape shifts, if you will, from one form or one version to another. This is saying that from spirit I could choose to arrange my pieces any of number of ways in this place, and so there very well could indeed be a Dave in the Pleiades living a life on a different planet in a different paradigm than this one. There is clearly a Dave here on the earth because he's talking to you right now, and there may also be other versions of Dave, and I have this represented on this picture as dark alien. In this case, dark only means something that is so alien to my ability to conceptualize that I actually can't conceptualize, and so it is experienced by me as being alien. And yet there very well could be other versions of me out in this universe, in what you call right now, that are me every bit as much as I am me, but just me with my pieces arranged in a different way. So other ways to say fourth dimension, one of them might be many worlds, which is what I have represented here. And another way to say that might also be many realities, a place where many outcomes of events actually do occur. Things that are possible do indeed happen simultaneously, just in different realities. And if we want to go and look at this in slightly other ways besides alien life forms on other planets, this is also a place where many lifetimes become possible and quite possibly real. And so the possibility of past lives and future lives happen here in fourth dimension. I'm told to consider the possibility that even our own dream world might be a step into fourth dimensional reality, because it is a reality slightly different than the one we normally know of as space-time gravity. And so big picture in fourth dimension, we're mostly talking about possibility here. And so fourth dimension becomes a place where many possibilities actually become real. And so if we move on from fourth dimension, which I've already given us a glimpse of that, we move actually beyond the confines of time. And so from this model, time actually extends in possibility into the fourth dimension. But if you leave the fourth dimension, and as the crudest of examples, let's say you die, the place that this would say you go to when you die and leave the time dimension is something that I think of as the spirit world. And so a way to say that here is fifth dimensional reality. This is the place where we may have indeed chosen to enter time, chosen to arrange our pieces in a certain way, chosen what we had the power to choose from a fifth dimensional perspective. And so fifth dimension, spirit world, also is a place where we actually enter a many dimensions reality because we've left the time dimension here and entered something different. And fifth dimension also happens to be a place where we have powerful choice compared to what we experience here. And so a way to say what happens in fifth dimension is that choice manifests. And one more picture I want to show you about fifth dimension, and I'm going to ask you first what would happen if there are 5 dots here representing aspects to me, dimensions to me, if I were to make these all in communication with each other so that they're all talking to each other. And what would I get as a picture of that? And once again, I get another one of these interesting pictures that we have from belief systems and religion in this place, commonly called a pentagram. And so, from where this model talks, this symbol, if I say what it means or represents fifth dimensional consciousness, or what I think of as the spirit world. And so if I'm going to ask you first, if we were going to move on from fifth dimension to a picture even bigger than spirit, even more powerful than choice, what that might be. And when I take that train of thought for myself, I reach a level of consciousness that I know of as creator. Now, at sixth dimension here, this is myself as a creator. And so myself with the ability to create in a particular way, and what this model says that I use to create in sixth dimension is thought. And so what this would be suggesting, if I were to retreat into myself all the way to the sixth dimension, it would be a place where thought manifests. I wouldn't even have to choose it. I would just think it, and it happens, if you could imagine such a place. And I'm going to ask once again, what would happen if I were to connect the dots so that all of these aspects, all of these parts of myself, all of these dimensions of myself were all in communication with each other, and what sort of a picture would I get? And I get one more of these religious symbols that I know of from this place. And so a picture that from this model represents the sixth dimension of me, the creator dimension of me. And so I'll ask before I show, once again, all of you, where would we go if we evolved sixth dimension one more order of magnitude larger than creator? And when I take that train of thought for myself, it takes me to a place I know of as many creators. And many creators, we've gone through choice in fifth dimension, we've gone through thought in sixth dimension. In seventh dimension, what this model says when we reach many creators is we come to a place where desire manifests. And so a place where I wouldn't even have to think about it, I wouldn't have to choose it. Wanting it would be enough to manifest my desires. And I can only suggest to you all that when we reach seventh dimensional consciousness and we're talking about manifesting our desires, folks, we are the many creators in this place, in seventh dimension. And so this picture is just, and there are 7 here representing seventh dimension, pictures of us staring into this mirror world, into this crystal ball world that we call time, and our desires, our thoughts, our choices, our interpretations are indeed creating what we perceive to be reality, and may be creating reality in ways that we are not even aware. And so, before we move on to 8th and above dimensions, I'm just going to belabor this point for a minute or two. This is about manifesting reality, and ultimately about manifesting our desires. And what this model says happens here begins in 7th dimension with desire, and says that desire combines with thought. and combines with choice and combines with possibility to manifest events that we interpret and ultimately experience. And ultimately what we do experience is our own interpretation of events. In order for those events to occur, it had to be possible for those events to occur. From this model, choice is what set this in motion, and above choice, before I chose it, I thought about it. And before I thought about it, my desire was at the root of all of this. And I just want to leave, before we move on to 8th and above dimension, leave you with a question here. What happens when desire becomes bent and twisted from fear? When we play compete for survival, when we play blame and punish as a game? What do we begin to think when that happens? And what kind of choices do we make when desire is bent and twisted from fear, and we're thinking from there? What are the possibilities when we choose from there? What are the possible outcomes when we choose from fear? We think from fear when desire has become bent and twisted in that way. What sort of events do we manifest? What are we interpreting when we are in fear? And what ultimately do we experience? What do we manifest here that we interpret and experience, all because fear got put into the equation up here when our desire became to not be afraid? And that is a definition from where this talks of bent and twisted desire. And again, not to belabor the point, but if we go all the way back to that second dimensional picture, we know it's possible that if I am indeed afraid, I can find ways to put that fear to the back of my mind and be acting from there. But when I do that, I have to ask the same question. What's happened to my desire? What am I thinking? What am I now thinking on levels that I would call subconscious or unconscious? And am I choosing from a state of subconscious or unconscious fear? Am I even missing the possibilities because I'm not seeing the true picture of reality? What am I manifesting in terms of events when I'm operating from there? What exactly am I interpreting to begin with, and what is the experience that I'm having? So with that, I'm going to move us on to 8th dimension. And just to recap before we do that, I want to remind us where we're moving from, which was 7th dimension, where we have a many creators perception of self. And so if we take many creators, yet another level out, another order of magnitude larger, it follows that many creators most likely create many universes. And you may have heard the term multiverse. It's just another way to say 8th dimension here. And what I have on this picture are my own imaginings of what different universe configurations might be. It just happens that in this reality, in the space-time continuum from where I'm talking, our universe happens to look like this one, what's called a Mobius curve, and so something that always returns to the same place no matter what direction it chooses. Matter comes out of the quasar, travels through space and time, and ultimately disappears into the black hole, only to come back out of the quasar again and play this game all over again. And in a many universes dimension, each of these possible universes might also have many versions of itself. And so that might look something like this. If this is a representation of my universe, a Mobius curve, then my universe may have many parallel universes, all of which are different versions of the one that I consciously remember from talking to you in this place. If I take many universes, another order of magnitude larger, I'm just going to ask you all first, where would I go? What is larger than the multiverse? And the answer I get from this model of reality says that I go to a dimension that I know of as all that is. So even more encompassing than many universes, even more encompassing than many dimensions. Everything that exists from where I am able to speak to you today in the space-time gravity dimension. Now, I know we're getting a little bit beyond our ability to comprehend here, so I don't have as much to show you about the upper dimensions, but I'm going to ask us all once again, is there anything beyond all that is? And from this model, absolutely, because in order for it to be, it had to be possible. And so if there is a 10th dimensional perspective here, I don't know that I have a name for it, but it would be a place where the impossible actually becomes possible. And if I ask us once again, if we go even larger than a place where the impossible becomes possible, where might that take me? And so it takes me to a perception of an 11th dimension, where possibility actually has become a constraint. And so in 11th dimension, I come to a place I know of as beyond possibility. And just one more way to say that, and I know I'm repeating the word here, but possibility no longer applies in 11th dimension, if you could imagine such a place. And so if we go even beyond a reality, beyond a dimension where possibility is no longer a constraint, where might that take us? And in this model, that takes me to where we've been trying to get all along, the 12th dimension. And from this model, the 12th dimension takes me to a place I know of as prime creator. Prime meaning single creator of everything from dimensions 11 all the way down to 1. And so you can use whatever term you like, source, God, if you have any other term for this perception of self, this dimension of consciousness, this is where this ultimately takes me. And I just wanted to leave us all with the question in the end, is there anything beyond this? Is there anything beyond a perception of a prime creator? And I'm not saying there is, I'm not saying there's not, it's just fuel for thought, because the question becomes, is prime creator alone in his or her or its existence? And if not, is it possible that there are actually many prime creators? And if there are indeed many prime creators, then this opens a whole new zoo of dimensional possibilities. And if I try to get a different image of what this arrangement might look like for myself, I end up with something that looks a little bit like this. And this would be a place where there are actually an infinite number of dimensions, and so an infinite number of realities. And just to explain a little bit about what I'm seeing here, where we just came from dimensions 1 through 12 would be down in one of these spheres, and so this would be a prime creator in connection, communication with many prime creators, all who have access to everything and everyone. And so if this is indeed true, could you even begin to imagine what must be out there to be felt or experienced or learned in this thing we call consciousness, that we are all part of? And so with that, I'm going to leave you for now and say thank you for listening, and ask you all to please help me share this with others by passing this video on to the people in your life that might find it of interest.